Hey everyone, welcome back to English Inside Out. Today we're talking about two expressions that confuse almost every English learner at some point. Not because they're difficult, not because they're advanced, but because they look incredibly similar. And yet, they live in completely different emotional worlds.
Yeah, and honestly, this is one of those topics where learners often understand the grammar, but still don't feel the difference. They learn, if I knew, and if I had known. And their brain says, okay, they're both about imaginary situations. Which is true, but it's not enough. Because native speakers don't really separate these expressions through grammar. They separate them through feeling.
Exactly. And that's what we're going to focus on today. Not grammar formulas, not conditional charts, not complicated terminology. We're going to focus on what these expressions actually feel like. Because once you feel the difference, you stop guessing.
And honestly, I think the reason learners struggle with this is that both expressions involve imagination. Both talk about situations that aren't real. Both start with if. So from the outside, they seem almost identical.
Yeah, but imagine two people looking at a road. One person is looking forward, the other person is looking backward. Both are thinking about possibilities, but they're not thinking about the same kind of possibility. And that's where everything changes. Let me give you an example. Imagine you're planning a trip. You want to buy your plane ticket, but you don't know how many vacation days you have available. So you say, if I knew how many vacation days I had, I'd book the flight today. That feels very natural.
Because the situation is still alive. Nothing is finished. Nothing is lost. You're standing in the present. You simply don't have the information you need yet.
Exactly. Now compare that with this. Imagine the trip already happened. Or maybe the trip never happened because you found out too late that you actually had enough vacation days. Now you say, if I had known I had enough vacation days, I would have booked the flight. And suddenly, the emotional feeling changes completely.
Yeah, the first sentence feels open. The second one feels closed. The first one still has possibilities. The second one feels like you're looking at something that already ended.
And honestly, that's the biggest difference in the entire lesson. Not grammar, not verb forms. Just this simple idea. One possibility still exists. The other one doesn't.
Actually, I think there's a really useful way to visualize this. Imagine a window.
Okay, a window.
When you say, if I knew, you're standing in front of a window. You can see another reality. You can imagine it. You can picture it. But you're still standing here, in the present.
I like that. Because the situation isn't finished. You don't know something right now. But life is still moving. The story isn't over.
Exactly. Maybe you don't know the answer, the address, the schedule, the price. But tomorrow you might. The window is still open. Think about these examples. If I knew her number, I'd call her. If I knew how to cook, I'd make dinner. If I knew what he wanted, I'd help him. In all of them, the missing information exists in the present.
Yeah, and that's why these sentences don't usually feel sad. They feel curious, hopeful, sometimes even playful, because you're imagining another version of your current reality. But then we have, if I had known, and honestly, this feels completely different emotionally.
Yeah, because now the window disappears, and instead, there's a door.
A door?
A door that already closed. You can look at it, you can remember it, you can wish things had happened differently, but you can't walk through it anymore. Imagine your friend throws a surprise birthday party. Everybody goes. Everybody has a great time. The photos look amazing. And 2 days later you discover that you were invited, but the message never reached you. Now you say, if I had known about the party, I would have gone. That feels different immediately.
Yeah. Because the opportunity is gone. The moment already passed. You're not imagining today's reality. You're reimagining yesterday's reality. And that's the emotional heart of if I had known. Honestly, I think this is why people mix these expressions up so often. Because both involve imagination. But one imagination looks forward, and the other looks backward.
Exactly. And throughout this episode, We're going to explore that difference through friendships, work situations, relationships, travel, everyday conversations, because once you feel the difference, these expressions become surprisingly natural. And by the end of today's episode, you probably won't be thinking, which grammar rule is this?
You'll be thinking, am I looking through a window? Or am I standing in front of a closed door? And honestly, that's a much easier question to answer.
All right, so let's start with the window.
Because before we talk about missed opportunities, we need to understand the kind of imagination that still has possibilities.
All right, so let's spend some time inside the world of if I knew. Because honestly, this expression is much more optimistic than people realize, not necessarily positive, but open, flexible, alive.
Yeah, and I think that's the first feeling people should notice. Nothing is finished yet. Nothing is lost yet. You're standing in the present, and you're imagining how life would be different if you had information that you currently don't have. Let's imagine something simple. You meet someone interesting at a conference, you have a great conversation, you leave. And later you realize you never got their email address. Now you might say, if I knew her email address, I'd send her a message.
Notice how that feels. You're not talking about yesterday. You're not regretting anything. You're simply imagining a different version of the present. Because technically, you could still find her email tomorrow. The story isn't over. That's why I really like the window metaphor. Because when you look through a window, you can see another possibility. You can imagine it. You can almost experience it mentally. But you're still standing here, in the present.
Exactly. And that creates a very different emotional atmosphere. The sentence doesn't carry regret. It carries possibility. Think about how often people use this in everyday life. If I knew how to play the guitar, I'd join your band. If I knew where the restaurant was, I'd meet you there. If I knew the answer, I'd tell you. If I knew what was causing the problem, I'd fix it. All of these situations have something in common. The missing piece still exists in the present.
Yeah, and that's the key. You're not looking back. You're looking around. You're looking at your life right now and saying, things would be different if I knew this. And honestly, this is where many learners get confused because the word knew looks like the past. So naturally, people think, this must be about the past. But emotionally, it isn't.
Exactly. And that's one of the strangest things about English. The form looks past, but the feeling is present. You're talking about something unreal now, not something that happened before. Imagine you're at work. Your manager says, "Can you finish the budget today?" And you answer, "If I knew the final numbers, I could." That's a very natural response.
Yeah, because the problem exists right now. You don't have the numbers. Today, at this moment, the situation is still active, and honestly, most if I knew. Sentences feel surprisingly light, even when the situation is frustrating, because your brain still sees possibilities. The future isn't decided yet.
Imagine a friend asks, "Why do you think she's upset?" And you say, "Honestly, if I knew, I'd tell you." That's a perfect example.
Yeah, you're not remembering something. You're not regretting something. You're simply saying, I don't have that information. And you're imagining what you would do if you did.
Actually, I think that's one of the easiest ways to feel this expression. Most "if I knew" sentences contain curiosity, not regret.
That's a great way to put it, because curiosity looks forward, regret looks backward, and if I knew almost always points toward possibility. Let's go back to travel for a second. Imagine you're planning a trip to Italy. You have the money, you have the time, but you don't know the exact dates of an important work project. So you say, if I knew my schedule, I'd book the flights. That feels very natural.
Yeah, because the situation is still developing. The answer might arrive tomorrow. The window is still open. And honestly, this is why "if I knew" often feels more hopeful. Not because something good will happen, but because something still can happen. There's still movement in the story. Let's compare a few examples. If I knew his number, I'd call him. the call could still happen. If I knew where she lived, I'd visit her. The visit could still happen. If I knew what was wrong, I'd help. The help could still happen.
Notice what's happening. In every example, the future is still available. The possibility still exists. Nothing has been permanently lost. And that's exactly why these sentences feel so different from "if I had known." So if we simplify everything about "if I knew," you're imagining a different present. You don't know something now. The situation is still alive, and the possibility still exists.
Yeah. And maybe the easiest way to remember it is you're looking through a window. You can see another reality. And maybe, just maybe, you can still reach it.
All right, now let's move into a completely different emotional world.
Because sometimes the window is gone, the opportunity passed, and all that's left is the question: what if things had happened differently? All right, so now let's step into the world of "if I had known." And honestly, this expression feels completely different emotionally, because we're no longer imagining the present. We're looking back at something that already happened, something that already ended.
Yeah, and that's why this expression often carries more emotional weight. Not always sadness, not always regret, but definitely more weight. Because now we're talking about a moment we can't change anymore. Let's go back to our metaphor. Earlier we talked about a window, a possibility that still exists. Now imagine a door you needed to walk through yesterday, but today it's already closed.
And that's exactly what "if I had known" feels like. You can remember the moment. You can imagine a different version of it. You can replay it in your mind, but you can't go back. Imagine you miss a flight. You arrive at the airport. Everything seems normal. Then suddenly you discover that the departure time had changed. The plane left 2 hours earlier. Now you're standing there with your suitcase, watching your trip disappear. And you say, "If I had known about the schedule change, I would have arrived earlier."
Yeah, and notice how different that feels from "if I knew about the schedule change." That sounds strange immediately, because the flight already happened. The moment is over, the story has already been written, and honestly, this is why "if I had known" often appears in moments of regret. Because regret is what happens when we look backward with new information.
That's such a good definition. Looking backward with new information. Because usually, when people say, "if I had known," what they're really saying is, "I wish I had this information sooner." Imagine you're preparing an important presentation. You spend 3 days building slides. You rehearse everything. You feel confident. Then 5 minutes before the meeting, someone tells you, "Actually, the client wanted something completely different." Ouch.
Yeah, that's painful immediately.
And afterwards, you might say, "If I had known what the client wanted, I would have prepared differently." That feels incredibly natural, because you're standing in the present, looking back at a finished situation.
And I think this is the biggest emotional difference with "if I knew." The future is still open with "if I had known." The future disappears because the event already happened. Imagine watching security camera footage. You're watching yourself from yesterday. You can see exactly where everything went wrong. You want to jump into the screen and help yourself, but you can't. You're only watching. That's the feeling.
Yeah. And that's why these sentences often feel so human, because everyone has moments like this. Think about these examples. If I had known the restaurant was closed, I would have chosen another place. If I had known she was leaving the company, I would have said goodbye. If I had known about the discount, I would have waited. If I had known the road was closed, I would have taken a different route. Every one of these situations shares something important. The opportunity already passed.
Exactly. The decision was made, the moment happened, the movie ended, and now you're imagining an alternative version of the story. Honestly, I think "if I had known" is one of the most emotional structures in English because it's connected to something universal. Every person has moments where they think, I wish I knew that earlier.
Yeah, and that's why this expression appears so often in real conversations. Not because people are discussing grammar, but because people naturally reflect on their lives. Imagine your friend moves to another country. You only find out a few days after they leave. And suddenly you realize you never got a chance to say goodbye. You might say, if I had known she was leaving, I would have met her before she left. That's a very real feeling.
Yeah, because the missed opportunity becomes the focus, not the information itself, the opportunity. Actually, this might be the easiest way to separate these two worlds. If I knew is about possibility. If I had known is about a missed opportunity.
I love that because it captures the emotional difference perfectly. One is still available, the other one is gone. Let's compare these. If I knew her number, I'd call her. The call can still happen. If I had known her number, I would have called her. The chance already passed. If I knew where he was, I'd help him. Still possible. If I had known where he was, I would have helped him. Too late.
Notice how every if I had known sentence contains two timelines. There's the real timeline and the imaginary timeline, and you're comparing them. That's why these sentences often feel reflective. So if we simplify everything about if I had known, you're imagining a different past. The event already happened, the opportunity is gone, and you're looking backward from today.
Yeah, and maybe the easiest way to remember it is you're standing in front of a closed door. You can see where it used to lead, but you can't walk through it anymore.
All right, so now we understand the window, and we understand the closed door.
Which means we're ready for the most important part, because now we can put them side by side and finally feel why native speakers never confuse them.
All right, this is probably the most important part of the entire episode, because now we're going to stop looking at these expressions separately, and we're going to place them side by side.
Yeah, because honestly, most learners don't struggle with understanding each expression individually. The confusion happens when they need to choose. They're speaking, the sentence is forming, and suddenly their brain asks, wait, is this if I knew or if I had known? And that's the moment we want to make easier.
And honestly, the solution is surprisingly simple. Don't ask, which grammar structure is this? Ask, is the opportunity still alive? Or, did the opportunity already pass? That's usually enough.
Let's imagine a concert. Your favorite band is coming to town. A friend asks, are you going? And you answer, if I knew where to buy tickets, I'd go. That feels completely natural.
Yeah, because the concert hasn't happened yet. The opportunity still exists. You simply don't have the information.
Now let's move forward in time. The concert happened, you missed it. Then you discover there were tickets available the entire time. Now you say, if I had known tickets were available, I would have gone. And immediately, the emotional atmosphere changes.
Nothing changed except time. That's what's fascinating. The same desire, the same concert, the same person, but now the opportunity is gone, and that's why the sentence changes. Imagine you're looking for a new job. A company opens a position, but you don't know about it yet. So you say, if I knew about any openings, I'd apply immediately.
Makes perfect sense, because the possibility still exists. You're imagining what you would do right now.
But imagine 6 months later. You discover there was a perfect position. It closed. Someone else got it. Now you say, if I had known about that position, I would have applied. Completely different feeling.
Actually, I think that's another useful distinction. A lot of, if I knew, sentences feel connected to planning, future decisions, future actions, while if I had known often feels connected to reflection, looking back, replaying a moment, trying to understand what happened. Let's imagine a relationship situation. A friend seems distant, quiet. Something feels different. You might say, if I knew what was bothering her, I'd talk to her. Very natural.
Yeah, because the conversation can still happen, the relationship is still active, nothing is finished.
Now imagine months later. You discover she was going through something difficult, and you never knew. Now you say, if I had known what she was going through, I would have helped her. That hits differently.
Yeah, because now you're not imagining action, you're imagining a missed chance to act. And honestly, I think that's why native speakers rarely confuse these two structures, because emotionally, they feel completely different. One feels open, one feels closed, one feels possible, one feels finished, one looks forward, one looks backward.
Let's do a few quick comparisons. Just listen to the feeling. If I knew the answer, I'd tell you. The answer could still arrive. If I had known the answer, I would have told you. The moment already passed. If I knew her address, I'd visit her. Still possible. If I had known her address, I would have visited her. The chance is gone. If I knew what he wanted, I'd buy it. Open possibility. If I had known what he wanted, I would have bought it. Missed opportunity.
Honestly, here's probably the easiest test in the world. Ask yourself, can this still happen? If the answer is yes, you're probably in if I knew territory.
And if the answer is no, that moment is over. Then you're probably in if I had known territory. And I love this topic because it's not really about grammar. It's about something deeply human. We all spend part of our lives imagining, and we all spend part of our lives looking back.
Yeah, sometimes we imagine possibilities. Sometimes we replay memories. English simply gives us different structures for those two experiences. So let's put it side by side one last time. If I knew, a window, a possibility, a different present. If I had known, a closed door, a missed opportunity, a different past.
And honestly, once you feel that difference, the grammar becomes much easier because now you're following meaning, not memorization.
All right, so before we finish, let's talk about the mistakes learners make most often, because they're actually much easier to fix than people think.
Yeah. And the good news is that almost all of those mistakes come from mixing the two worlds together.
All right, so let's talk about mistakes, because honestly, most errors with these expressions are not complicated at all. They're actually very predictable.
Yeah. And once you understand the emotional difference between the two worlds, most of those mistakes start disappearing naturally. Because the problem usually isn't grammar. The problem is that people accidentally mix a present imagination with a past result.
Let's start with the biggest one. Imagine your friend tells you, that restaurant was terrible, and you answer, if I knew, I would have warned you.
And that's exactly the kind of sentence learners produce all the time. Because it sounds almost correct. But something feels strange.
Yeah, because the sentence starts in the present world and finishes in the past world. If I knew, present imagination, I would have warned you. Past result, two different timelines, two different emotional realities.
So if you're talking about a past situation, everything should stay in the past world. If I had known, I would have warned you. Now both parts belong together. Now the sentence feels complete.
Think about it this way. You can't stand at a window and a closed door at the same time.
Exactly. Choose one world. If you're imagining the present, stay at the window. If you're reimagining the past, stay at the closed door. Another common mistake is, if I would know.
Oh yeah, I hear that one all the time. And honestly, I understand why people say it, because they know the sentence contains would. They just put it in the wrong place. But native speakers don't say, if I would know. They say, if I knew. The imagination already exists inside the structure. You don't need another would.
For example, if I knew the answer, I would tell you. Not, if I would know the answer. Because the sentence already works without it.
Now let's talk about something more subtle. Sometimes learners understand the grammar perfectly, but they choose the wrong emotional world.
Yeah. Imagine someone says, I missed the meeting, and you respond, if I knew about the meeting, I would come. The grammar isn't completely broken, but emotionally, it doesn't fit.
Because the meeting already happened. The opportunity is gone. We're no longer talking about possibility. We're talking about a missed opportunity.
So naturally we want, if I had known about the meeting, I would have come. Now the emotional logic matches reality.
Honestly, whenever you're unsure, ask yourself one question. Just one. Is this situation finished? That's it. If the answer is no, use if I knew. If the answer is yes, use if I had known.
Let's test it. I don't know what time the store closes. Finished situation? No. If I knew what time it closed, I'd go. Makes sense. Now. The store closed an hour ago and I missed it. Finished situation? Absolutely. If I had known it closed so early, I would have gone sooner. Different world, different feeling. Honestly, I think one reason this topic feels difficult at first is because people try to memorize structures.
Yeah, but once you start feeling possibility versus missed opportunity, everything becomes simpler because that's what native speakers feel, not grammar charts, not terminology, meaning. So let's simplify the whole episode into two emotional questions. Question 1. Am I imagining a different present? If yes, if I knew. Question 2. Am I imagining a different past? If yes, if I had known.
That's it. Honestly, the entire lesson lives inside those two questions.
All right, so before we finish, let's bring everything together one last time.
Because I think you'll notice that this topic isn't really about grammar anymore. It's about how we think about our lives. All right, so before we finish, let's zoom out for a second. Because today wasn't really about conditionals, and honestly, I think that's the biggest takeaway from this episode.
Yeah, because if you look at everything we discussed, we weren't really talking about grammar. We were talking about two very human experiences, imagining what could be and imagining what could have been.
And that's why these two expressions matter so much. Because they're not just sentence structures. They're ways of thinking, ways of looking at reality.
Exactly. One looks at the present and says, things could still be different. The other looks at the past and says, things could have been different. And that's a huge emotional distinction. Let's go back to our two images one last time. If I knew a window, you can see another reality. The possibility still exists. The story is still moving. If I had known a closed door. The moment passed. The opportunity is gone. You're looking back at a finished chapter.
Honestly, I think that's why native speakers rarely confuse these expressions. Because emotionally, they don't feel similar at all. One feels curious, the other feels reflective. One feels open, the other feels final. One belongs to possibility, the other belongs to memory. And if you think about it, we use both of these ideas all the time in life. Sometimes we say, if I knew what to do, I'd do it. We're facing uncertainty, trying to move forward, looking through the window.
And sometimes we say, if I had known, I would have done things differently. We're looking back, trying to understand a moment, standing in front of the closed door. And honestly, that's what fluency starts to feel like. Not remembering grammar labels, not analyzing every verb, but understanding the emotional meaning behind the structure.
Exactly, because once you understand the feeling, the grammar becomes much easier to remember. Meaning comes first. The structure follows.
So maybe the biggest idea from today is this. If I knew imagines a different present. If I had known imagines a different past.
And honestly, that's almost everything you need. So before we go, we'd love to hear from you. Write 2 sentences in the comments. One using, if I knew about something in your life right now, and one using, if I had known about something from your past.
And don't worry about being perfect. The goal isn't perfect grammar. The goal is learning to connect the right feeling with the right structure. That's where real fluency starts.
And if this episode helped you finally understand the difference between if I knew and if I had known, share it with someone who's still mixing the two together.
And don't forget to subscribe for real English
Real conversations.
and real progress. See you in the next episode.
Bye, everyone.